George Kilpatrick, inspiration for the nation, celebrating people we feel good about. We've got a trailblazer in the house. Wade Davis is a speaker. He is an author. Your book came out, right? Your book is out, or is it just...
No, it's not out yet. I'm still working on it, and but it is coming. It is coming. Yeah, it is coming.
But he's a gender consultant. He's a vice president for inclusion strategy for product at Netflix. Played in the NFL for several teams, and did something pretty remarkable. Came out after he retired from the NFL. So we want to talk about that journey. Wade Davis speaking at Syracuse University this week as well, and a talk titled "The Mask of Masculinity." And Wade, you talk about that mask of masculinity and what that means for you. But let's go back to the beginning. Talk to me about where you grew up and how you grew up.
Yeah, so George, it's a privilege and a pleasure to sit in conversation with you. But I'm a Southerner. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. My father was in the Air Force, so I was born on an Air Force base. Mm-hmm. And then at around the age of 2 or 3, I moved to Shreveport. So I'm from the boot. And I lived there up until like 7th grade, and then we moved to Colorado. So I kind of label myself as a Southern Mountain West mutt, but my roots are Southern. I don't have a Southern accent, but like I see myself definitely as a Southerner.
And certainly being Black and gay, there's this theory that in Southern culture, and particularly Black Southern culture in particular, that this is something that is certainly not accepted. Is that still true?
So here's what I'll say. There are lots of myths around Black folks, and this is another one, right? Like,
right. That's why I asked that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Like there's this idea that Black folks are more homophobic than any other group, but
it's a trope.
If we were to take a step back, Black folks have never had any real voting power to put any anti-gay laws on the books. So if you look at the anti-sodomy laws that exist around the country that started, some of them were like in the early 1900s, some in the late 1800s, like white folks put them on the books, right? So, and that's why I love your question, because it gives me the opportunity to say that Black people are no more or no less homophobic than anybody, right? Like all people struggle with with the idea that gender performance should match your identity, right? And that your sexual activity should be very, very binary. But we all know that life is much more complex. Life is much more gray than that. And yes, right. Like I won't sit here and lie to you and say that when I told my family I was gay, that they were lollipops and cotton candy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there was a lot of consternation. There were lots of hard conversations. There were a few years where I actually did not speak to many of the members in my family. I'm happy to report now, right, that me and my family are super close. But part of that journey is having to recognize that your parents specifically, when they have a child, they have a vision and a dream for what that child's life will look like. 99% of all parents dream their children will be heterosexual. That is not good or bad. It just is what it is, because parents know that if you are identifying as LGBT, your life is going to be more challenging, because our world is not constructed in a way where everybody just opens up their arms for LGBTQ plus folks, right? And my parents were no different. My mother, I'm the only boy. I'm the youngest of 4. I've got 3 older sisters, and there's this idea that I've got this Black young man from the South, plays sports, right? Like he is going to be the carrier for the family. And when I told my parents that I was gay, right, all of that shattered. All of the. So James Baldwin says that we come by our certainty so very rare.
Sure.
Right? My mother was certain that I was going to be a heterosexual, strong Black man, right? And I am still a strong and weak and vulnerable and all of those things Black man. I just happen to not be heterosexual.
But you played that role for her for a minute, right?
Man. Oh, yeah.
Right. So you did everything she wanted you to do until you told her that that's not who you are.
Exactly. And, and your point is so real, right? That, I had the privilege of being able to perform a certain type
Hmm.
of gender, right?
Yes, yes,
That
yes.
made the world believe that I was heterosexual, right? And to be honest with you, I've wanted deeply to be heterosexual. Like, at that time, you don't know that your life can be fulfilling, that it can be valuable if you're not heterosexual, right? So there
Hmm.
was a big part of me that wanted deeply to somehow like trick my mind into being heterosexual, but that's actually not who I am, and it's not what I am. But to your point, like when I told my mother that I was gay, she thought that all of the dreams and all of the forms of safety that she hoped for me would go away. And in some ways she was right? Because so my mother's oldest brother, they have different fathers, and he was about 20 years her senior. His
Hmm.
father was lynched when she was a little girl,
Sure.
right?
I'm
So
sorry to
what
hear
that
that.
informed in her is do everything you can to give her son, me, right, the tools to survive this world as a Black man, right? But she's not thinking that she needs to give me this other tool to survive
Right,
the world
right.
as a Black gay man, right? So when I tell her that I'm gay, and her first thought is, oh, he's dead, because the
Mm,
world is
mm.
is already going to put these barriers in front of me because I'm Black. But now if you add the gay on it, like she's like, oh my God, like my son is going to live a life of great uncertainty. And that is every parent's worst nightmare.
Wade, it's interesting because you talk about every parent's worst nightmare, and getting comfortable with the language of gender orientation, right? Because we grew up, all of us, with the social norms that gender was binary. You were either
Mhm.
this or that, assigned at birth. You know, smack the baby, it's a boy, it's a girl. And I'm a gender violence person. So I didn't mean smack the baby, but however
Yeah,
the
yeah,
doctor
I know what you
got
mean.
to
I know what you mean.
right, right. So this idea, what's so frightening about this idea of continuum for us? What is so frightening about that? Because it is frightening for a lot of people,
Oh yeah,
because that's part one of my question.
yeah.
What is about that continuum that frightens us, that we don't admit for some, but that exists for all, pretty much?
We like our world to be binary.
Mhm.
It makes it just easier to exist, right?
Right,
To
right.
your point, we have the doctor says that your child is a boy, your child is a girl. You don't have to think about it anymore,
Right.
right? And then once the doctor says your child is a girl, right? There's expectations that the child's gonna like pink. There's expectations that the gal's gonna like, dresses. So like you can sort of go on autopilot. And that actually is what makes your life easier, that you actually don't have to think. But if the doctor says that your child is a girl, and then 3 years later, your child starts to perform a gender that doesn't match your idea of what a girl should actually do, life starts to get a little complicated sooner than one wanted it. And it disrupts your sense of safety. All of us as human beings are trying to construct our lives to be safe, to
Sure.
be safe, to be safe, to be safe. And anything that disrupts our certainty, anything that disrupts something that felt easy, right? Like we have a resistance toward. And right now, the resistance is toward anything that makes us have to think. And so my partner, he's French, and when we started dating 7 years ago, tomorrow actually, he taught me something that I didn't realize. He says in France, he did not take a multiple choice test until he got to America to take the his for his law degree. And I was like, wow. And what I was thinking about is like how that forces you to think critically about the world,
Hmm.
right? Because the answers just aren't, A, B, C, or D, but we are kind of acculturated to actually think that life is like this really simplistic answer that you can get to. And that actually makes us feel comfortable. And but to make this as simple as possible, I really do believe that the binary just makes life easier and it makes us feel safe.
I wanted to double back to a little bit about the Black culture and tradition. And what I'm thinking is this. I think it's kind of like this. And tell me what you think about this. So you're right. You said we're no more homophobic than anybody else. in terms of our acceptance on that basis. Here's what I think is happening in our community. We all right as long as you're not out with it, right? In other words, right? Like because it's in the culture, it's
Yeah.
part of the culture, but as long as it's over there and not out, I think we're more accepting, not we are more accepting of it, but I'm
Yeah.
just thinking as community, as Black community, as long as you don't put it in our face, right? Quote unquote. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you how. So am I right about that and going in that direction? Or what do we think about that?
I think that there's some truth in what you're saying, right? So, and I'll relate it to football.
Right. Yeah.
So, anyone who's ever been in a football locker room knows that there are activities that, if shown on camera, people would think, oh, that activity seems, not the norm for your heterosexual man, right?
Right. Right.
To make that less abstract, right? I remember when I was in high school and in college, right? We would guys would wrestle in the locker room, sometimes wrestle in their jock,
Right.
sometimes wrestle naked,
Right.
right? So if I said to any person, hey, there are two men wrestling naked, your mind immediately goes to something sexual,
Right.
right? Now, that's acceptable because there's an assumption that everybody in that locker room is heterosexual.
Correct.
But once you, to your point, enter the idea that one of those persons may be gay, then all bets are off because there's potentially an enjoyment of the
Right.
wrestling.
Right.
But here's the truth. There was an enjoyment when the two who were thought to be heterosexual were doing it. Otherwise, people would not do it, right? When you wrestled with your big brother or your uncle, whatever, you did it because you actually enjoyed it, right?
Right.
But because there was no assumption of sexual attraction or enjoyment being involved, right? So to your larger point, I think as long as you can perform a certain type of gender that doesn't make me uncomfortable, that
Right.
doesn't make me have to get proximate to being gay, I'm okay with. But if you are a much more effeminate presenting man,
Right.
now you're constantly making me, you're keeping it top of mind. And I don't want to have to think about this other man being gay, because what might that say about me? Because all human beings know that as you and I are talking, George, like you're going to do something or say something that is going to mirror back me, right? Like you're not some alien from another planet. Like you're going to do things or say things that I can, consciously go, wow, like me and George are very similar, right? But you don't want to do that if you go, me and George are very similar, but George is gay. So what does that say about me? You know what I mean? But if I perform a certain type of gender that matches you, and then now you forget about the idea that I'm gay, you're comfortable seeing that mirroring happen. So I think that all people, absence of their race or what have you, we are comfortable if the person who we're engaging with, that mirroring us back, what they're mirroring back again makes us feel comfortable, makes us feel safe. But, and the last thing I'll say, and I promise I'll shut up for a second, I'm on a text chain with 12 of my college teammates, right? And we talk about everything and anything. And I was interviewing them for my book, and I asked them, I said, what is one thing that no other human being can call you, that would cause you to get out of your, like that you couldn't let it go? The one word that they said that they couldn't let go is if somebody called them a bitch.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, that's an interesting one. But what they didn't like, and they couldn't really even answer the question with great levels of specificity about why. But what I got to is that being called a bitch, and I hope I can say this on your podcast,
You can say it, yeah.
is that it puts them in proximity to being a woman. And a woman cannot protect themselves if somebody wants to do something to them. So if I'm engaging with a gay man who I believe is presenting like a woman, and I see myself in that person, that starts to make me feel insecure, deeply insecure. And that's psychological. Most people won't even own that. People listening to your podcast are gonna be like, Wade is full of shit, right? But if you really search yourself, the discomfort that we have with another person oftentimes is because we see something in them that we also see in ourselves, and we really want to reject it.
you know, in your TED Talk, by the way, talking to Wade Davis, and a former NFL player, vice president at Netflix, and talks all over the country about the mask and masculinity. One of the things that you said, and I'm sure you've been asked about this, but since you said that nobody asked you about this a couple of years ago when you did your TED Talk, I'm gonna ask you now. So when did you know it was unacceptable to be gay? That's the question you said that you're rarely ever asked, because this goes to part of your performance and your masking, because I'm sure that in your performance of football, which you liked football, right? But you also said that you already knew, even as a football player, that you were attracted to boys. So how did you know, and when did you know that that was unacceptable? Or is that a lesson you just had your whole life because society just kept telling you that's not cool?
So I probably started to learn that there was a certain way that boys were supposed to comport themselves in the world, probably around the age of 4, 5, or 6. Like I remember I was with my grandfather, and I didn't have any understanding of my sexual orientation until I was in high school, right? So there's a big gap, right? But I remember going to the mall with my grandfather, who was a Prince Hall Mason, who was a tall, black, beautiful man. He was probably like 6'2", deep voice. He used to always call me Junior, right? And I remember we were in the mall, and he saw this woman who he believed her gender performance was unacceptable. And I remember he called her a bull dagger.
Right.
And we all know that that's a very problematic, derogatory term. And as a child, I don't know what that term means, but I have an understanding that something about the way she shows up in the world to him is unacceptable. I also knew that my same grandfather did not allow my mother to wear pants, and she could not wear skirts above the knee, right? I also could not play with the little girls in the street, right? But I could play with the boys, right? So at a young age, you start to be given these signals, right? Around what behaviors are acceptable and unacceptable. And then there's an accumulation of those things. And a child's technique, as Baldwin says, is silence. When a child is silent, that's really when they're learning the most. And I was raised hellfire and brimstone, that, my mother used to always say, you do as I say, not as I do, right? So I was always a very silent child. So I would say that from a very young age, the last thing that I'll say is, in the church, I remember I was probably about 7 years old, and my mother was in the choir, my grandmother was a deaconess, and we used to go to church 4 or 5 times a week. Like we was in
I know
that
that's
church
right.
house, right?
No, but no, you weren't Church of God in Christ, were you?
No. I was Southern Baptist.
Southern
but,
Baptist.
It's similar. It's very similar. And I remember sitting in the pew watching my mother sing "How Great Thou Art," right? And just being amazed at the power of my mother. But then I'm looking in the pulpit, and you only see men. And I shit you not, I remember leaving church one day asking my mother, why don't you sit up there ever? Because I saw my mother as this really powerful human being. And what she understood me asking was, why were there no women up there, right? And again, I don't have consciousness of any of those things. And she looks at me and she says, shut up, boy. And what's interesting thing about that now is, how would my mother been able to articulate like historical patriarchy to a 7-year-old kid who recognizes that, right? So even then, I am learning, even in the church, right, that there are certain roles, that there are certain opportunities and behaviors that must be exhibited by certain genders, right? So I would say I learned that being outside of the norm was unacceptable probably as early as 4 or 5 years old.
So how did you learn? Well, so I have like 25 questions in my head. So let me just rapid fire.
Yeah.
The first thing is, so you played the role until you didn't, right? And so I know that you talked about having some internalized homophobia. Did you hate yourself? Did you hate yourself?
God.
How, what was that like, hating who you knew you were but could not express? And then at some point you decided that I'm going to express. And so take me through that journey.
This is the hardest question to answer. It's like you're trying to kill off a part of you while you're still living. And I know that if you were to really search yourself, you could probably get proximate. But what it feels like is being schizophrenic. It's just probably the most, simplest, and that's not simple at all, but simplistic way to say it. And what it also requires is mimicry, right? So I would mimic all of the men who I believed that the world thought were acceptable, right? So I remember I used to wear oversized pants. I was wearing 38 size jeans and I'm a 28. I'm wearing XXX t-shirts and I'm a medium, right? Like I'm performing all of these ideas of gender because I want to be safe. I deeply want to be safe.
Yeah.
And so killing off parts of, so for me, killing off part of myself meant that I would never allow myself to know not what I am, but who I am, right? Because what you are is what the world tells you. The world tells you you're straight. The world tells you you're gay. The world tells you all these things. But who I am is what happens to me because of all of those actual things. But because I had never experienced, what it might be to be intimate with another man in a sexual way, I didn't know. I didn't know what love was. You know what I mean? Because I was closed off. Like basically, it's like you're closing yourself off, not just from everyone else, but from yourself. Is another probably way to describe it.
Did you attempt to find that with women as a way to prove yourself not to be what?
Oh yeah. So I had sex with women, and the complicated thing about that is your body responds to certain things, right? So it wasn't that I couldn't be intimate with a woman, right? It wasn't what my body naturally oriented towards. So when people say the language of sexual orientation, what that means is that even if I wanted to not allow my body to be attracted to another man, there's nothing I can do about it. It's involuntary, right? So if right now in my house, let's say Beyonce walks in and I see Beyonce and I know that in my mind's eye, Beyonce is an attractive woman, but my body doesn't respond to her the same way it would Idris Elba. You know what I mean? Like I can't force my body to go get excited about Beyonce. Like no one does that, right? Like it's an involuntary response.
But at the same time, look what I just did. I put it in the binary. You could still be and decide to be intimate with women if that's what the spectrum of your sexuality.
Yeah.
Right. If that was the spectrum of your sexuality, right? So I wanted us to walk in, somebody might say, well, we just said that there's a spectrum and he could if that's what he wanted to do, but mean, right.
Well, no, so it's and so like a lot of folks use the language of preference, right?
Right.
Right. And it's an interesting one, right? Because my body, responding in a physical way to a man versus a woman is not me making a preference. It is involuntary, right? So your question for me as someone whose body does not respond to women often, right? And I use the word often with intention because there are some women that my body will tingle and I'll be like, oh, that hasn't happened in a while. Right. But primarily my body responds to individuals who my body and my mind reads as a man.
So you talked about the schizophrenia of the trying to come to grips with this. So how did you learn to love yourself enough to announce to the world after you were a professional football player? And I don't know if as you were playing football, did you have relationships and did you keep them on the down low? And did any of your teammates ever know that you were gay at that time? And then how did you learn to love yourself?
Yeah. So I'll answer the second part of your question first. And I know that you didn't mean anything nefarious in your comment, but the language of down low is really unaffirming.
Oh yeah, I did say that.
It's
okay.
It's like I know that you didn't mean it in that way, right?
Yeah. Yes, educate me on that because and here's what I meant by that. Meaning that you kept a certain performance for your team and some may have known, but you didn't put it in That's
Yeah,
how
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I intended
No,
that.
I know exactly how you meant it. So I don't use the language of coming out either,
Yeah,
right?
someone else
And
said that too. I wanted to ask you
yeah,
about that because
yeah, yeah. So a
someone
friend of
told me
mine,
about.
his name is Darnell Moore, right? And
Okay.
he coined the term inviting in.
Mm,
Why that epistemological shift in the language is important is that coming out connotes that LGBTQ people have something to hide because who we are is bad, right?
mm-hmm.
But actually inviting in puts the onus on heterosexual identified folks to create a world that is loving for people who don't identify the same way that they do. So the onus is actually on y'all, right? To perform a certain type of lovingness so that we invite you in to what's happening in the interior of our lives. The language of down low, right, puts the onus again on LGBTQ people as if we want to not tell our families, our friends who we are. It should be, that the idea that heterosexual people are down low for the way that they treat us, or
Right.
like, excuse me, are low down, as we say down south, right?
Right.
Because again, like if we start to shift the responsibility, it is those who have powers responsible to treat other people with dignity and respect. And if heterosexual people weren't so low down towards LGBTQ folks, right, we would not have to perform a certain level of hiding who we are. And again, we only do it because of the safety piece. You know
I
what I'm
want to,
saying?
yeah, and
Yeah.
that safety piece is important. I'll pick that up in a second, going back to the first part of my question,
Yeah, yeah.
which was what was happening on your
On the inside.
teams at the
Yeah, yeah.
time, and how did you navigate that?
Yeah. So once I took ownership of the fact that I was gay, and this was college, so I knew I was gay in high school. I took ownership of it when I was in college. By that time, it wasn't sports, it was the world had
Mm-hmm.
told me that who I was unacceptable. So I immediately just made a decision in my mind that I wasn't going to tell anybody.
Okay.
So once I got into the NFL, it was too late. Like I was
Yeah,
never going to
yeah.
tell anybody then, right? So, but that acceptance of that you're going to hide yourself is, the most dangerous place in the world to be, because inside of your mind is the most dangerous place, especially if inside of your mind says that who you are is, deserves to not see the light of day. So once I finished playing in the NFL, I had moved back to Colorado, and I wasn't a superstar by any
You
means,
just
but I
Wade
was
Davis by this time. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. But I was well known enough to not believe that I could go into a gay bar and not have somebody go, is that Wade?
Right,
So I
right.
moved to New York City because I wanted to experience the world as a gay man with a certain level of invisibility. I
Right.
needed to be able to do this without people who would know me, eyes on me. So when I moved to New York, it was the best thing for me because I got a chance to find out who I was, right? And I got a chance to go to my first gay club, and I found, right, that most gay clubs actually didn't really match who I was. You know what I mean? Like I love to dance. I mean, like I can get on that floor and move beautifully. But here's the thing that's really terrible to say. Most gay men cannot actually dance. So I actually prefer to dance with women because there's a way that, that we vibing and we moving and like no one's fighting to lead. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you can exchange that. And then I was fortunate enough to get a job at this LGBTQ youth center called the Hedrick Martin Institute.
Mm-hmm.
That was the place where I met young people between the ages of 12 and 24 who taught me how to love myself, meaning that they had risked their safety, they had risked their entire lives to be who they were. And when I saw that, I was like, what is preventing me from doing that? When you had kids who were taking what I would consider real risk. For me to tell the world I was gay as an NFL player or post NFL, it was a little different level of risk. You know what I mean? So the other piece that was really important was I was introduced to feminism. And what feminism did, and when I read books, whether it was Audre Lorde or Bell Hooks or Ella Baker, right?
All
What
right.
that did was
So what book did you read on bell hooks? Which one did you read?
the very first book that I was given by bell hooks was a book called Feminist Theory from Margin to Center.
Okay.
And what that book did, and many other books, including lots of James Baldwin, it helped me describe what was happening inside of my mind. Like it gave great clarity to that, the fact that I wasn't the problem. Because when you're trying to hide who you are from the rest of the world, you believe that it's you, right? But what I had to learn was that when someone says something about me, it says nothing about me, but it says everything about them. So if someone called me a fag, it would say nothing about me. It would say everything about you, right? So like learning that I wasn't the problem was the first step in me starting the practice of loving myself. And I had to develop, I use language of practice with intention, right? I had to do morning affirmations. I meditate every day. Like it is still a daily journey to love myself. And it's not only because I'm gay, but all of us, you know, it's what it means to be human, right? To fight in a world that tells you you're not enough, you're not tall enough, you're not dark enough, your nose is not skinny enough. Like the world always tells you you're not gay. So that you're not enough. So I had to develop a practice.
You know, Carl Nassib, is that his name? Carl Nassib, who was openly gay in the NFL playing for the Las Vegas Raiders. They just, I believe, reportedly released him a few days ago. But how significant was that for him, and how did you view his coming out? He did it kind of nonchalantly. He's, oh yeah, by the way, I'm gay. And now the connection to Syracuse is that his brother Ryan was a quarterback here at Syracuse, and you know the Raiders put out a statement. You know, we fully support you, bravo, and I assume his team, supported him as well. Let me pause before you answer that. So when you heard about that, how did you feel? How significant was it?
So, and this is my truth, right? It's not, I can't, for me, at the time that it happened, it was important, but for me as a gay man, it wasn't significant because I had already gone through my own personal journey. You know what I mean? I do believe it is extremely significant for other people, right? And I am deeply proud, and I am embedded, and I mean indebted for Carl's courage. But for me as an individual, it wasn't significant just because I was further along on my journey, right?
Yeah.
What I do believe though, is that it continues to help redefine, you know, very archaic narratives around what it means to be a man, about what it means to be a football player, about what it means to be a woman, right? Like it continues to complicate those stories. So anytime someone stands up in front of the world and says, this is who I am, with a certain level of confidence, there's a shift, right? So I believe for the world, it was significant. It's just less significant for me.
You're part of the NFL's inclusion committee. Is the purpose of that committee to make the world see people from all walks of life, including LGBTQ, in a certain way? I mean, what is the point?
So I would say the real point is to remove the barriers that exist in the NFL for players like Carl to not feel comfortable to step into their truth, right? So it's less about any type of marketing. It is just saying, hey, like we know that there are still pockets of the NFL, pockets of society that aren't affirming. So how do we give people the language? How do we give people the education? How do we give people the tools to be able to continually remove those actual barriers?
Do you know if, given that, so there's another piece that's happening. I believe Laura Thomas, is that her name? The swimmer. I'm not sure what her name is. Anyway, transgender swimmer. A lot of people are supportive.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I hope that's her name. But anyway,
I'm not sure either, so I don't want to lie to you, but
yeah,
I know the story.
Yes, NCAA breaking records. You know, how do we navigate that world? Because a lot of folks they don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, so one, I think that all of us, including me, right, have to continually educate ourselves on these issues, right? And the one thing that I'll say that will really complicate this for your listeners and maybe yourself, right, is you never hear of a trans man playing sports and anyone has a problem with them. You only hear it about trans women, right? So that should tell us that there's something else happening here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because truthfully, right, should sports not be integrated, right? So let's take Michael Phelps. He's a good example and probably the safest example. Michael Phelps, and this is public, right? Like his hormone levels are higher than your average man.
Mm-hmm.
They just are, right? So if hormones are the issue here, why aren't we testing all athletes and saying that here is the range that you have to be in order to compete, right? Because truthfully, then Michael Phelps probably would be outside of that normal quote unquote range and wouldn't be able to play. But because Michael Phelps is thought of as a biological man and his biology matches up with his own identity of how he sees himself, everything is okay, right? But if somebody else's, whether it's Castor Semenya, right, whose biology, right, doesn't match what we believe, the presentation of a woman should be along with their hormones, right, then we have a problem, right? But so that's why I say, like, if we really take a step back, there's a potential that the way sports are set up is inherently set up to benefit male identified folks whose biology matches their identity, and it is always going to punish women, right? If you think about the way that people talked about Serena Williams,
Right.
right? So like we can make it about trans
Particularly
folks, but
white
it's
folks.
actually
Yeah.
exactly. But it's
Yeah.
actually not a trans issue. What this really is that we have a very narrow understanding of gender, of hormones, and all of those things. Because if you don't have a problem with trans men playing sports, then why do you have a problem with trans women? And if you didn't have a problem with Michael Phelps's hormones being outside of the normal man, then why do you have a problem with anyone?
When you speak around the country, Wade, and you're talking about the mask of masculinity, what are the things you want us to take away from what you're trying to say to young people? I'm speaking mainly to Black folk, but for people from all walks of life, what do you want them to walk away doing, thinking, feeling as a result of getting to know you? Because you perform your identity a certain kind of way, right? Will it be more acceptable to hear from you than from somebody else? I'm sure it is. So,
so your last point is very true. I have a lot of privilege. Like people don't read me as heterosexual. I mean, as homosexual. Because I played in the NFL, that gives me a different level of social capital. Here's the only thing that I want when people leave a talk of mine is that they question all of their assumptions.
mm-hmm.
That's it. Like you will never hear me use the word change. I'm not interested in changing people because people have to decide for themselves who they are and who they want to be, right? I hope that I say something that sparks someone to question their assumptions about the world, right? So when I say like that I want us to think critically, like that's what I really want. So when you hear someone say, I'm having a gender reveal party, go like, what does that actually mean? Like what does that really mean? Or something as simplistic as and to take it out of the gender space, right? Like let's go to race, right? Which for us as Black folks, we understand, right? Like we all know that you will never meet a Black person who doesn't come from the South, like who's an African American, and that also means you're never going to meet a Black person who was born, whose family is rooted in America, who is not also has a part of them who like that doesn't have white biology in their body, right? So that means that we're not a pure race. but also white people aren't a pure race, right? And even the term white, right, is made up. It's actually not even real. Like, so we know this, right? So how can we start questioning the assumptions that we're living by, knowing that the things that we were given oftentimes don't feed us, right? Don't offer us anything affirming.
Well, let me ask you this then. Has your mama invited you to her church, and will they let you come into the church and speak your truth and have those assumption questions? Would they allow you to do that?
Oh yes. But again, it's because I have privileges, right? Former NFL player, right? My gender performance. So what I try to do when I speak in certain places that I know that they're accepting me because of certain privileges I have, I try to name those privileges. To say, would you accept me if I wasn't this former NFL player? Would you accept me if my gender performance made you a little bit more uncomfortable, right? And that is a way that they get to do what? Question their assumptions. Think a little bit more critically about the world. The other thing that I try to do is I never walk into a place making people want to feel like that I am better than them. And that is a rule. So I have two rules when I give talks. I always ask the audience, can we all be disinterested in needing to be right? And the second one, which is even harder, can we all be disinterested in needing to think of ourselves as good people? Because what does that even mean, that I'm a good person? Like, what does that actually mean? Right? Because all of us have fallen short. All of us do things that if someone flashed a light on it, we would be really embarrassed.
I would say I try to do the right things when you're looking.
Right. And so, if I were to follow you around 24/7 for a month, right? And you forgot the camera was on you, right? I would probably see George do things that I don't know if I would put in the good person box. Right? But does that make you a bad person? No. What it makes George is human. And all of us are trying to be better, I hope. Right? All of us are trying to be better. But the only way that we can continually be better is if we continually question the things that are given to us and question our assumptions.
Last thing I ask you is, what haven't you been asked that you want to say something about? What you want to talk about, Wade? What haven't you been asked that you feel like, I need to say this because this hasn't been said yet?
That's a lot. That's probably the biggest question that you've asked. Here's what I'll say: is that it is very hard to be in spaces where, and I'll speak as a Black man, where we don't allow Black people to live in the fullness of ourselves. Meaning that, like, I despise the term strong Black woman, because that doesn't allow any space for Black women to be full human beings. I don't love the term strong Black man, because I'm not always feeling quote unquote strong. Like, can we as Black people continually create the spaces for us to be full human beings and not worry about what white folks are going to think about us, right? Like, can we continue to do the work to look inward instead of looking for affirmation outward? And what I call that is, can we focus on excellence, which is what I get to determine? Like, am I performing a certain level of excellence every day, and not this idea of success? Because somebody else says, George is so successful, but what if George don't feel successful? Right. But no one would ever say, George, you are performing high levels of excellence, right? Only you get to know, like, am I waking up doing everything I need to do to be the best George that I can be? Only you get to know that. And if we can move from the external needs of validation and really do the real hard work of internal validation, we can get rid of so much shame. We can stop worrying about whether folks see us as gay or straight, as all of those other things that I mentioned. So if there's one thing that I would love for folks to do, is to go, how do I stop worrying about what other people think about me and really focus on myself?
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, please.
I understand what you're saying, and I love the idea of that. The only thing is, the reason why we have to uplift and continue to say strong Black man and strong Black woman is because so much of the culture and society tells us something else. or
that's the problem,
right?
right? Again, like you're still looking at the
I'm
society,
looking
right?
at it.
Because
I
yeah,
am, and I guess what I'm trying to say is I understand what you're saying, but in that moment, I still got to lift up little Johnny and little Tanisha so she knows she's valued and validated. So I
but
guess,
that has nothing to do with being strong.
okay, so I feel like this. All right, so then what is the language we can use that continues to validate and pour into our young people so that they know exactly what you're saying,
You
but they may
teach
not
them,
have the way
you
to
teach
do that?
them their history.
Mhm.
You teach them their history so that they understand that there is much more than what the world is saying about them, that we have a full history,
Mhm.
right? Where we have been strong, where we have been weak, right? Where we have been human. As
Mhm.
long as you give them history so that people know where they're from, then they can then know where they can go. Right.
Right.
But if I don't know where I'm from, then I can't, right? The biggest gift Obama ever gave us,
Yeah,
right?
you consulted with him, didn't you?
Yeah. The biggest thing Obama ever gave us was the symbol of Obama.
Right.
His symbol of Obama will be greater than anything, any legislation that he
Well,
passed.
and that is the debate, right? Yeah, the symbol more than the action, but
Oh
okay.
yeah, because symbols matter, right?
Right.
So, and I know that this statistic because I'm working on this in my book. The numbers may have changed a little bit, but when I was doing my research, there were 5,913 statues in this country. Of those 5,913 statues, less than 400 of those statues are of women.
Mhm.
Of those less than 400 statues of women, more than half, a little bit over 200, are goddesses and ladies of liberty, right? So somebody knew that it was important to put statues in the world, right? Symbols in the world, because symbols matter, right? And they also don't put our history in these books because
Right.
they also know, right, that what symbols in history does is it gives people a sense of themselves. If you give little Johnny and Tanisha a sense of themselves, can't nobody take that away from them. But if you just tell Johnny and Tanisha, you're strong, like, blah, 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 like, and they don't know why they're strong. And they don't know that they can also be weak. I can take that from you. Right. So
Mhm.
we just got to continually give our kids history, right? The true history that we're no better than white folks, but we damn sure ain't no worse than they has, right? If we can do that, then you don't have to do anything else.
What I'm hearing you say is you want us to have the full capacity to be both weak and strong, and that be okay. That's what I'm hearing you
Yes.
say,
Yes.
right?
And the only way that you can give us that, I promise you, is by giving kids the truth and their history. And don't tell children what to think, teach them how to think.
Come on now. I see
Because you
you.
can't take that from me. You can't take teaching me how to think from me. But if you tell me I should believe X and then someone enters something new and it breaks that away, what am I left with?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing about this gender thing, right? If I teach you that there's only man and woman, if I teach you that there's only that, right? And then you're introduced to something new and I don't know what to do with that, what I'm going to do is I have to reject it because that's holding up my world. But if I know how to think and somebody goes, you know what? Huh, there is actually no way for you to even prove that you're white. You made that up.
I see you. I see. By the way, what's this background? We're on this this chicken. So I'm thinking, is this some homage to your heritage? What is this with this background? Was that
So
the one
my
that you found that worked for you?
no. So this is the backyard of my partner. And I grew up with chicken. So when I saw it, it just made me smile. So whenever I see it, it makes me smile, man.
I
That's a
see you.
beautiful question. That's a beautiful question.
I appreciate that. Listen, do you identify as queer? That's the other question. In that language.
Yeah, so the language of queer is fine for me. I also identify as gay. Yeah, here's the truth though. The thing that I identify with the most is being black.
Amen.
That's
Okay.
what I identify as being most with. And it's also because I've had to do the most work to love being black.
Mm.
You know, because I knew I was black before I knew I was gay. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Who's doing last thing? Wade, I keep saying last thing. That's probably the
No, it's
23rd.
okay. We can keep chatting, bro.
Listen, when you think about the culture, right?
Mhm.
Who's doing what? Well, first of all, were you the first to come out and in the NFL, or
No. So I was probably, I don't know, third or fourth,
third or
maybe.
fourth? Okay.
Yeah, the first one was a wonderful man named David Cope. He
Oh,
was the
right. I
first.
remember. Yeah. Did he
Mhm.
play for the Rams, I believe?
No, he played for the team from Washington that is now known as the
Commanders.
Commanders.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. I thought it. All right. And in terms of black and gay, you just took
Yeah,
me down another path now.
let's
So
get into it.
um it's interesting because people think this whole idea of racism within the gay community, right?
Oh, it's a lot of it.
Right? Like that
A
that's a
lot of it.
and people don't even think of that. Oh, we all unified because of our sexual identity, but racism is within all of the communities, right?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yeah.
Uh,
So, like one of the hardest things for me, and this is why your first question was so poignant, right? So I believed when I was first, coming into my own, I believed that Black folks were more homophobic. I believed that myth, right? And what that did is it sent me into gay white spaces,
mhm,
right? Because I believed that those spaces would be more affirming. Wrong, right? Because even though they were affirming of my gayness, they weren't affirming of my Blackness, right?
mm,
So then you feel a different level of schizophrenia. You know what I mean? And but what it took was me finding queer Black spaces. And what it even took, more importantly, and I'm not putting down anybody, but Black women have always been the most affirming people of me,
mhm,
Wade Davis. I can't speak for everybody, but if I'm gonna run to the rock, I'm running to Black women,
mhm,
because Black women have risked so much
mm.
for me. And I know full stop that there will never be another person that will love me the way that my mother did. But I'm doing the work now. I'm working really hard to see my mother as a woman, because my mother was a woman before she was my mother. She was a full human being with desires, with needs, and all of that. So if there's another thing that I would leave your listeners to, is for every Black man or man who's listening to this talk, do the work to see your mother as a woman. Do
Mm,
that work, and because
mhm.
when you do that work, it'll break open your understanding of some of the risk and some of the sacrifices that your mother made
Oh
for
yeah,
you, that
word.
that this woman made. And what that means to me is that, like, feminism, what it did also was it crystallized the work that Black women did to save this world and to save me. So when I say that I'm Black first, it's because it was Black women who really gave me the tools, to answer your larger question of how to love myself. It was Black women. So you're never going to hear me say one unkind word about Black women. I don't give a damn what they do.
I know that's right. Uh, in terms of the culture right now, lastly, when you look at some of the performing artists, Billy Porter, Lil Nas X, and some of those who we get to see the
Mhm.
show Pose, are we culturally, well, so you talk about Black women. What about Black men and the work that we have to do, right? I had to because I forgot.
We got a lot
You
of
said
work
I
to do.
love Black women,
We
right?
got a lot of work to do. And I'm saying we, because I'm a part of that, right? Like,
Right.
I'm not separate. I would say the work that we as Black men have to do is get comfortable sitting in partnership with Black women. And I'm using the word partnership with intention, because we're used to leading, right? We're used to leading the church, right? And what I did was I did a lot of research to understand why that was. And what I learned, and my stepfather helped me see this after he passed away, is that, so I have five uncles rather, and two fathers. I got my stepfather and my biological father. Every Black man that I've ever known went into the military.
Mm,
Everyone, right? What I had to realize and read about was that Black men in the South of that time period, there was four ways to make it out. You were going to be an athlete or a prize fighter primarily. You were going to go into the church, or you're going to go into the military. The only fourth way was dead or in jail, right?
mhm.
And that meant that we felt as if we had to be a certain level of strength and a certain level of power in order to find a sense of self, right? But what we didn't realize is that we could find that sense of self in partnership with women. And there's a line in Aretha Franklin's song that I love called "Ain't No Way," where she says, cold, hard, and cruel is a man who's paid too much for what he's got. That is what us Black men have to realize, that we have been cold, we have been hard, and we've been crude to Black women because we've paid too much for what we've got. And what we thought that we needed was what white men had. But what white men got is fool's gold. It's fool's gold, right? It's not real, right? So what I would ask all of my Black men to do is to do the work to see Black women as your partners. Like you don't have to rule over Black women. Like you really don't. So when we have a Black Lives Matter movement that is led by 3 Black women, 2 of them which are queer, and we can't get behind that, what does that say about us? What it really says is that we believe the only path through freedom is patriarchal. But that's actually not freedom. Again, that's fool's gold, right? That if we sit in community with Black women, with queer Black women, with queer trans Black women, right? Then we get to a lower common denominator and we get more of us and not just the ones that make us feel safe.
All right, then how about with queer Black men? Because that's all, if you look at history, obviously one of the most prolific writers, James Baldwin, Bayard Rustin, behind the March on Washington, that's just 2 people in my quick thinking. But what I'm saying, what about that relationship as we close? Because if we don't figure that out, because I believe that there's still this sort of, and then
here's the truth. If we can get comfortable with Black women, you'll automatically be comfortable with Black queer men. Right. So the root of homophobia is sexism.
Talk to me. All right.
Right. So one of the real reasons why some, I don't want to say all, some Black men are uncomfortable with queer Black men is because they believe that the activities, our behaviors are more akin to what women do. Therefore, they don't want to get proximate to us. But as long as you believe that a woman's role is a certain way, you're automatically going to believe that a man's role is a certain way. But those things aren't true, right? Like we can't get our self-esteem on the backs of other people. So what Black men have to really do, again, if you can get comfortable with your Black women, you will be fine with Black queer men, because oftentimes their discomfort with us is because they see us as too proximate to women.
Wade Davis, you done did that. You can WadeADavis.com, currently Vice President of Inclusion Strategy for product at Netflix. He's consulted with major players in the game. What is the name of your forthcoming book? Do you know yet?
So right now it's The End of Safety, which is why I'm talking about safety very much now.
So much.
My agent is not in love with it, but I love it. So I'm fighting for it. And what I'm trying to get of is that we have to be comfortable with the idea that safety is not real, right? There's this quote by and
it's certainly it's not guaranteed if you're LGBTQ, right?
But it's not guaranteed for anybody. And you never meet a Black person that ever expects to be safe. We don't expect to be safe. Right? We're always, as Bell Hooks says, standing in the circumstance of risk. Right?
Yes.
If I am trying to be safe individually, and I'm not trying to bring others with me, right? Then my safety is always going to be more important than someone else's safety, right? But if we can realize that safety is not real, it's imagined, right? Then we can actually go, oh, the thing that I'm fighting for, I'm never going to get to, because there's certain things that are just out of our control, right? Like if there's an earthquake right now in Los Angeles, I can't control that. So I can't create that safety. What I can do though, is get comfortable with the idea that I got to stand in a circumstance of risk.
Wade Davis, thank you so much for what you're doing. Be Black. I was going to say be strong, but
I can't be anything else. I can't be anything else.
I was going to say be strong, brother, but you don't like that. So
no, here's what you can tell me. It's keep reading, brother. Just keep reading,
brother. Yes.
Keep
reading, brother.
Yeah.
Keep reading, brother. Wade Davis, Vice President, Inclusion Strategy for Product at Netflix, recently talk at Syracuse University called The Mask of Masculinity.
It's coming up this Thursday. So
Thursday,
if
March
folks can come out, I'll be giving a talk. Please come out, ask any and all questions, challenge me. I'm open to being challenged. I'm open to feedback. I'm open to critique. As I said, I'm disinterested in needing to be right. What I'm interested in is growth.
Let's go. Let's do it. Wade Davis on Inspiration for the Nation. Thank you, Wade.
Have a good day, brother.